Making art a living. I am hosting a live podcast today talking about this topic that I absolutely love. And I've been talking about it now for years, making art a living. And yeah, just thinking back to actually 8 years ago when I set up United Art Space and I decided what I wanted to help people with. I wanted to help all artists, but I had to really think about what do I want to help artists with? And this term, making art a living, has been such a great phrase to focus what I help people with. And it's been a phrase, make art your living, that I have been toying around with and exploring and what it means and how you make it happen and our relationship to what making art a living is. And isn't it funny how just a few words can mean so much, can mean so much. And so I'm talking today about this term, making art a living, and start the workshops. A week today, as I'm recording this, we start our Make Art Your Living workshops. And some of you may have taken part in these workshops before. I run them every year. Some of you may have just come across us for the very first time and will be taking this for the first time. And I have to say, I absolutely love running these workshops because every year, it doesn't matter if it's your first time, your second time, your third, your fourth, your fifth, people have a different result every time. And for some people going through the Make Art Your Living workshops, it's a case of maybe having had a break and you're returning back and you start to connect with your art again, call yourself an artist for the first time. It's exciting. For some people, these workshops have been the catalyst for people making a full-time living, like within 12 months. Sometimes it's been a few years. So I'm excited. I'm excited because we kick off these workshops next week. If you want to take part, the link is below or around here somewhere. It's free to take part. There is a option to upgrade if you want to access extra bonuses and worksheets and things like that. But those who've taken part in these workshops before will tell you the whole week I am delivering free content and I will be doing Q&A sessions. And it's a really, really exciting event because thousands of us from around the world come together to just stop for a moment. We just stop for a moment and we connect with our artwork, and I'll be encouraging you to choose one artwork or one project so that you can really kind of connect with the 7 keys in a deeper way. And this is my framework, the 7 keys, that I'll be talking about during the Make Art Your Living event next week. So in this podcast today, I wanted to just talk about what it means to be making art your living. And I've got on my list here to talk about what it actually means, whether you can actually make art your living, and the different ways that you can make money and impact through your art. So that's the 3 things that I'm going to be covering today. So if I start with what the term means, make art your living. So for me, I have 2 views on what that term means, what this term means. And so one view is the most logical and the easiest for us to kind of get our heads around. And making art a living, or making a living from my art, means that I am paying my bills and paying for my lifestyle through my art. Simple. And that one's probably the most easiest for us to get our heads around. And that then opens up lots of questions around, well, what do you need to make a living? And do you just need to sell your art, or could you do other things that help you along that journey? And so that's one road that I'm looking down, or one pathway I'm looking down, is the financial aspect, making a living, covering the costs, funding my life. And it's absolutely possible to do that. And I sit here today and I am making art a living, making a living from my art, whatever way you want to say it. And honestly, I never thought it was possible. And this is why I want to share this far and wide, because For me, I always struggled to make money, to be honest, full stop. It was just always a problem in my life, and I was going from job to job to job. And when I first graduated from art school and I started selling my art, I never ever dreamt actually back then that I would make a full-time living from creativity and from art. That felt like a ridiculous dream. And so I I kind of did disregard it years ago of making money from my art, and kind of wanted to try and get other jobs that were more secure. And for me, my own journey, which I kind of talk about in the book, Your Art Matters. Thank you to everyone who's bought a copy so far. We're still in the bestsellers list, which is amazing. Um, yeah, my journey was kind of from a place of not actually being able to get a job. I'm so happy now when I look back and I think, gosh, I was turned away so many times from employment. And I'm so glad because it kind of pushed me down a different pathway. And, for me, it was really then a case of making my art and actually figuring out that my love of being around creative people and providing a space, that was what I was passionate about. And so that you can kind of make your art and sell your art and make a living from your art, absolutely. And I know loads of people that are doing that, especially within our own community. That is 100% possible. You can sell your art and make enough to cover your costs. You can. And just knowing that is liberating. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but you can. It's possible. It's possible for anybody to do that. If you set your sights on making that happen and you follow this framework and you keep going, you can make that happen. So for me, though, and this brings me to the second part of what make art your living means, is there's the making a living and bringing money in, but then there's also another pathway. And that's not necessarily about the money. It's about making art your living in the sense of understanding how art is an extension of yourself and how that relates to the music that you listen to and the decisions that you make and how your art ties in to so much more than you realize, and that how every artwork you make is a visual record of yourself and your journey, and connecting the dots between an artwork that was over here years ago and it now existing and how it comes back in. So an example of this is, again, what I talk about in the book. I created some leaf paintings and drawings, and I kept drawing them and painting them over and over again when I was going through a bad time. And at that point, I didn't like those leaves, and I was very critical of them, and I was embarrassed by them, and I didn't do anything with them. They just sat in a drawer. And now those leaves have come back 5 years later, nearly 5 years, and I've turned them into bookmarks. Oh, I thought I might have one here. I've turned them into bookmarks, and now those leaves represent so much in my life, and it's crazy. And so, these leaves, I'm not really thinking about how they're making me money. It's not about that. The leaves have taught me so much about myself, about how I was feeling at that point in my time. The leaves, now I look at that artwork and they represent hope and they represent resilience. And that's making art your living. When you start to really embrace your art and use it in a way that teaches you so much about your life and other people. And that is making art a living as well. These two different pathways, well, like they merge and come together. But so for me, when I'm exploring this concept of making art a living, I'm bouncing between two. Now you might just be focused on, I just want to make the money. just wanna make art and make money. And for m f for some, you might not wanna make the money, you just kind of want you like the idea of embracing art in this full way and how it enriches your life, and that's what you're here for. And actually, if you make money, then that's brilliant, but it's not your driving force. So, whatever your driving force is, whether it's the money and to make art a living and that's what it is, or whether it's actually the other way round, and if you make money, then it's a bonus. This is about you finding out what's making you tick, and there's no right or wrong in any of these situations. And so for me, I've loved understanding that there's kind of like these two pathways and I bounce between both of them, and for me they're very much integrated, and that's how I make money because I was, for me, focusing on how I make art a living in the bigger sense. And so when I started to focus on that, so going back to my journey years ago, if I was just focused on selling those pieces that I originally sold, and then if I just kept making more art and selling those specifically, I probably would have carried on and made a living. Um, I was making money, but I wasn't making a living from my art. And so if I'd have just carried on and focused on that, probably I'd be in a completely different place now. But for me, there was a bigger calling in, actually, I don't want to just sell my art. I want to kind of bring people together. There was more. And so for me, then there was this kind of exploration of how my art and making my art feeds into creating a space for people. And it has all these different branches. And at the essence of all of this, though, at the core of all of this, is my art drives all of this, what I do today. And I make a living, not from selling my specific pieces of art, but I have to make the art for it to create the living that I'm making today, if that makes sense. It's the catalyst, it's the driving force. My art drives everything else that I do and is the reason that I've got the book, and it's the reason that I've got the podcast. And so that has come from making art a living from a different point of view. And so going back to these two pathways and whether you can make art your living, because that is a big question I know that people have. Like, really, can I do this? I see people making a living, but sometimes it seems like a struggle. So I'm going to just talk about the financial side now. That I've tried it. I feel like I've tried and I've tried and it just doesn't seem to be working. So really, can I sell my art? Can I make that a living? And so this is what we're going to be kind of going through in the workshops next week. We're going to be talking about this conversation more because there are different ways of approaching this. And so when we start to break down these 7 key steps, if you want to make money from your art and that's your pathway and that's what you're focused on right now, understanding these 7 keys and how they influence where you put your work and who it's for and how you talk about it. And then when you start to think about how you would sell that so that you can pay for your lifestyle and your your day-to-day living expenses, it's then a very practical outlook because you're looking at, what does it cost for me to make a living? And whilst I'm transitioning into becoming an artist, creative that makes a full-time living, let's look at this. What does that actually mean, making a living? So it's about then breaking that down into, well, I need this for my rent or my mortgage, and I need this to pay the food bill. And you're actually looking practically at what it means to be making a living financially so that you have a baseline. And if you are transitioning, it might be looking at that and asking yourself, how do I make this easier? How do I maybe cut back on some costs so that the cost of living straight away isn't so big? But also, then when you have that, then you can actually start to look practically at, what you need to sell to make that happen. And that becomes your goal. And I like talking about good, better, best goals when I am thinking about, I was in this situation when it was about making art a living. For me, this is the exact steps that I went through. Wrote down on a piece of paper what it is that I needed to earn and then started to think about the ways that I could bring that in. It gave me then practical steps and practical actions. And then I could put the 7 keys into place, which is what I'm going to talk about next week, to strive forwards and make that happen. And so even now, I am making a living for myself, but the next level up for me is thinking about how do I give myself a pay rise? How do I grow so that we can take on an extra team member? How do I so my cost of living, let's just say for the business as well, is going up. And so now it's not like I've just like made art a living and then that's it. Now I just put my feet up. We're always still working on this. We're always still looking at what is that number? And that number will likely grow. And so, how do we expand what we're creating and selling to fulfill that living? And so, that's what I found, in setting up United Art Space is that that number is not fixed. It's moving all the time. And so, I still have to do the work to figure this out because you want to be going up, don't you? You want your income to be going up. And so, I naively years ago thought that I would hit a certain number financially and that'll be it. Then I'm sorted. I'm like, yeah, that's brilliant. I'll just hit that number and then I can, then I'll be relaxed and everything's going to be fine and all my problems will be solved. It doesn't work like that. Um, and that's why going back then to the other way of making art a living, I feel is important because when you hit that money goal, it's not going to fix all your problems. And money is there for a very short time and then it's gone. And then you do it again. And so, in all of this, I always say to people, it's fine to be money orientated. It's absolutely okay to be money orientated. And it's quite exciting to set money goals and see how you can hit them. For some people, it's not, it's stressful. But money comes and it goes, it's an energy source. And so, actually, the more you can encompass the other side of making art a living, which is really understanding how art is having such a bigger impact on you than you realize, and how it impacts other people, and the richness that it brings, and the amazingness that it brings to your life to be able to help you connect with other people and for you to express yourself through this crazy way of making, and how joyful that is and how amazing and incredible and what a gift that is for you to create outside of your physical being and create something that exists and lives on. When you start to kind of fuse that with the money and the practicalities of making art a living, because that's what's important. The money will come and it will go, and you'll set a goal and you'll hit it, and then you need to do it again and again and again. And so the money, although yes, it's going to help your life and it's exciting when you hit the goal, um, it's not going to fix all your problems and it isn't going to make you happy. It might make you happy for a minute, but then it's going to go. So again, that's why focusing on the other part of making art your living, the other pathway that I see, is equally as important, because that's what keeps you going. And that's when you come back and think, oh God, that money goal, and I've hit it and now the money's gone. What's the point in this? The point is because of the richness and the other part of making art a living, and why that is so important to your existence and you creating, and how it isn't just about the money, though the money is great. And so they're the two kind of philosophies and ideas that I'm bouncing around with this term making art a living. And when I'm delivering the 7 keys to you next week, I'm fusing both of these together really, um, because that's where the magic happens. And so the next question of whether you can make art a living. So in the practical sense of paying your bills and supplementing your lifestyle through your art, it really comes down to what I said about looking at what that means. What does making art a living mean? And then in the practical sense, it's about looking at what you have and figuring out a way of how can I take this and use what I have to start making money to pay for this living that I've created for myself. And everybody's living is different. Some people can make a living by earning 10,000 a year, and they've got a very simple life, and they live very simply, and they're very happy, and they don't really go on, like, lavish holidays. They maybe go and stay with their friends and stay on the sofa, and they're happy doing that. They're really happy living that way, and for some people, a living is you want 3 big holidays a year, and you wanna travel in first class. So, that's the first step, is defining what that actually means. And so, again, I'm gonna come back to this good, better, best. When I'm defining what it means for me in terms of making a living, I like to have 3, and you don't have to do this, I'm just saying this is what I do. I like to have 3 visions. It's a good, better, and a best. And my good is is what I'm living right now, and I wanna maintain this. I wanna maintain the salary that I pay myself. I want to maintain the amount of holidays we have, and the way we're living. That's my good goal, is let's keep this going, because if I can keep this going, this is good. And then my best is the crazy goal that I have no idea how I would hit that, the salary that I wanna pay myself, the dream team that I have running United Art Space, the places that I'm going, and the second home that I have, and, like, that's bonkers. I'm like, I have no idea how I would get there, but I'm planting it there, and I look at that vision every single day. I'm doing this challenge at the moment where it's about creating a goal for yourself and looking at that goal every single day, and I am, and it's really quite exciting, and now it's starting to feel more achievable. When I first looked at it, it felt ridiculous, but I'm actually getting excited by it, and I have no idea how I'm gonna get there, and that doesn't matter. The point of that expanding my living goal is to put it out there, to make it a possibility, because without that possibility, then, well, it's never gonna happen, is it? Because it's not even on my radar, I'm not even thinking about it, but now I'm upping my game, and I'm thinking, "What would it look like if I earned that amount of money? What would I be doing? How would I be living?" And I'd be going on these holidays, and I'd have this second home, and I'm like, "Wow, this is a rich life." And it's an interesting process to go through, because when you start to think about how you can kind of expand your living, it might feel icky. You might feel, I don't want that. It just seems greedy. And so it's a good process to go through, because it brings up the feelings. What's stopping you from having that? And so in the middle of those two, the good, the best, it's the middle, basically. So what does it look like halfway to that big vision that I have of making art a living? And that I can kind of half sense how I could get there, but still there's some question marks. So bringing it back then to then this whole practicalities of making art a living, when you start to look then at what are the next steps that I could take towards making a living full time, it's breaking it down into the tiniest next steps. Because often people don't just start making a living quickly overnight. If they do, it's because they've hit a trend, or they're in the right place at the right time. Money comes, money goes. It's going to be short lived. This 7 key framework is about setting up solid foundations so that you continue to make art your living. And it's the long game that we're playing. It's not a quick fix, like, I just want to make money fast. which you can do, but this is about making art a living is about creating a sustainable living for yourself so that you're not always worried about where the next bit of money is gonna come in from, which still is a worry. I still worry about that. Don't think that ever goes when you're self-employed. But so once you've got that kind of what does making art a living mean, and we'll just go back, strip it back down to the good version. Then looking at what you have already, but then keeping an open mind, and that brings me to the third topic that I want to talk about, the different ways you can make money and impact through your art. This bit is exciting because sometimes as an artist, and I'm just assuming right now that most of you here have art, like physical, two-dimensional, three-dimensional art. Some of you might not, you might have books and things like that or workshops. But you have something. You might even just have one artwork to sell, and actually that's all you need. When we go through these workshops next week, all you need is one artwork, one thing to sell. And so it might be that you just have um, a workshop, a piece of art or something, and you start to question kind of how could I take this through the 7 keys next week? We're going to do this. How could I sell this? Start with what you have to begin with. How could I sell this? And then when you start to crunch the numbers and think, well, how many of these would I need to sell to make my living? This is where then it can start to feel, oh, this isn't possible. Or some of you might not. Some of you might crunch the numbers and think, this is really possible. I'll share a quick example. I remember when somebody in our membership, and I can't remember who this was, somebody was made redundant, an artist. And she was made redundant and she had no clue what she was going to go on to do. And so I remember this person coming into the membership and saying, "Oh, I've been made redundant. I would like to run workshops, but I've got so much fear around it. But I feel like I'd like to teach my art skills to other people." And that's all it was just this idea. And then she randomly went into this cafe the next day and spoke to the cafe owner and said, "I've just been made redundant." And yeah, and I think they might have said, "So what you gonna do?" "I don't know, but I quite like the idea of running some workshops." And the cafe owner said, "Well, that's crazy because we've got a bottom floor underneath here, which is completely empty. And we were just saying last week that we would maybe like to turn it into some workshop space. So if you want to use the space, you can, because you'll be bringing people in and they'll be buying drinks and use it." So all of a sudden she had a space. And so she then worked out her first workshop session, which she was terrified to do, by the way. She came into us going, I'm like, I've got this space now. Now I'm too scared to do it because I don't have any qualifications. I haven't taught people before. And so we kind of talked her around and said, it's okay. You don't have to. I've got these qualifications or taught before. And you can keep it really simple. Just say, doing this workshop. You don't even need to teach something sometimes when it's a workshop. You can even just bring people together, dump a load of art materials and just say, we're going to just play. And, and people will pay to be part of a community and be part of a conversation and art and be chatting. And so, anyway, she then decided to put a workshop on and created the flyer, put it into the cafe, and she sold out of the first workshop. She ran it and she absolutely loved it. And then, so what she worked out that she only needed to run, I think it was 5 of these workshops a year, and she will have covered her salary that she'd just been made redundant from. So all of a sudden, she had a solution. She had no clue when she was made redundant, and these steps just led to, "Oh my gosh, I can actually just turn this into a living." So the reason I mention this is sometimes, it might not work that way for you. You might make art. So let me think of an example. It might take you months to make one artwork. And so when you start crunching the numbers, you might think, well, how on earth am I going to make a living because I can't make the artwork fast enough. It just doesn't add up. And then that's where some people just give up because they think, well, it's never going to happen for me because I can't. It's physically impossible. And that's where I want you to keep an open mind, because going back to this other side of making art a living, when you start to connect the dots and you start to reach out to people in connection to your artwork, and you start to learn about the different ways that your art could actually impact people, and the different ways of making, and the different ways of, you can make prints and you could license it. There's a whole probably world out there that you just don't even know exists, because you're trying to work it out from the sums and just thinking, based on my situation right now, this is impossible. And so when you keep this open mind of, like I have, I've got this best goal and I have no idea how I'm going to hit it, but I'm going to keep it there as an option. There's a way. I know in this community, there have been ways that people have started to make money from their art, and from different ways that I didn't even know was possible. And it blows my mind. And it's because they didn't give up. They kept going with, okay, I like making this kind of art. And this is what I want to teach you in this framework, is that when you start to connect with your art and build the bridge between your art and your people, and you start to keep an open mind about the possibilities and ways that you could use your art, and it's amazing. I mean, just a few examples right now have been people that have come through this workshop and now have gone on to teach live in, not teach, sorry, do be paid to paint live. And that's how Summer, who did a video with us the other week, that's how she makes her living. She just gets paid to paint in front of people. She says she gets paid really, really well because she's in the wedding industry. And so that is actually paying for her living. And she says she earns way more money than she was when she was employed as a teacher. And then by tapping into that, she's also now creating art and doing commissions. So she's painting live. And what's happening is she's doing all these different types of art too. So a lot of people get hung up on, you've got to do one thing and then that's it. But we'll be talking about this next week. It's not necessarily the case. And so Summer now, she says she's just got the most amazing life and she's making a living and it's wonderful. And it came from figuring out the practical side of it, but also this concept of making art your living in the bigger sense. Linda, who came on last week to talk to us, did these workshops that I'm going to run next week, and she had not made art in over 30 years. And she went and did a glass workshop because she wanted to make a gift for her mum, and went in to do this workshop and then started selling pieces locally. And we spoke because that was 2 years ago. Within 12 months, she was making a full-time living because she just focused on glass. So Linda focused on, right, I'm going to make these glass pieces and I'm going to get them in every local business and home in my local area. And she just went on this mission to just sell her pieces. And she built momentum and she became known as the crazy glass lady in her local area. And she just she used the 7 keys to just focus on that. And now what's happening for Linda is now she's expanding and she's running workshops and she's doing them at her home. She said, and it's just so relaxed and lovely. And now her whole life is full of art and people, and she's making her living. And she said, okay, I'm not making like loads and loads of money, but I am making enough to have a life that I am so happy with, a life where I get to wake up every day and I decide how I'm going to spend the day. And I can just sit and make glass all day long if I want to. And it's enough to pay my bills and keep my life really simple. And so a lot of this is about your expectations too, and how making a living, what does that mean for you, and you designing your life to fit around that. And so there are so many different ways of making money from art, but also different ways that your art can impact others. Another example is Simone Patterson, who Simone was struggling for years to sell art and went through this framework a few years ago, 5 years ago, in fact, I think it was. And Simone went through this framework and then started to connect with a different type of art that she wanted to make. And again, just focused on that. I'm just going to focus on making that art and finding people for that art and focus on how to sell it. And that's what she focused on for a short period of time. And she started to sell out all of her pieces, and it grew from there. And now her life 5 years on is this rich, beautiful life of being in her studio that she um, created by design. It's in the mountains in Virginia, and she's just done a mural for the local the local there's this local group of young people, and she's worked with these young people to get them making art, and they've made this amazing mural in the local area that's going to stay there forever. And so it all came from years ago, focusing on, well, I'm going to just learn how to sell this type of art, to now she's had a retrospective recently and she's exhibiting, and she's now making different types of art. And I share that story too, because a lot of people think sometimes when you're focused on, right, let me just figure out how to sell this type of art, that you're limiting yourself. But if you can see into your future, you're not. You're just bringing it down to learn these 7 steps that I'm going to teach you next week. And so that's it. That's my concept on making art a living. I think that when you can approach it with joy and with knowing how your art is such a gift and it has so much more power than you realize to impact your life and the life of others, making art a living becomes so much easier, simpler. Let's say it's simple, but it's not easy. And I will always say that, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's difficult. It can be difficult. And so the more you can kind of make this whole process enjoyable and actually enjoy making your art and enjoy putting it out in the world and feel confident in what you're doing, and understand it and feel great just talking about it, the more you can actually work on that part, the easier it will be to sell it. I promise you, because that is what sells to other people. I'm going to go to the comments now and see who's tuning in. So it's good to see you all here. Let me know, where are you in the world? And Karen's with us, Rosie. Oh, it's so good to see you. Nicola's here. Catherine, Janine, hello, Haley. I saw lots of you. Oh my gosh, just over a week ago now. Sheena, Marita's with us. Sarah, good to see you again, Sarah. Um, okay, so Brian's with us too. Hello, Brian. Tanya's tuning in from Ireland. Catherine, yeah, we see you've got a question. We'll go and answer that one over in circle, not a problem. Um, um, Karen says, making art makes me feel good so I can function well and make a life for myself in other ways. I love that. Anna's tuning in from Italy. Good morning, Anna. Um, yeah, I love this from Lisa. Rather than making a living, I am making a life to my design. Oh, goosebumps. Ingrid says, I want to make enough money to buy paints, etc. My dream is actually a second house and a Porsche. I love it. So that's yeah, your best goal. And I think having that there is important. It's important, a reminder, and keeping that open to the possibilities. And we laugh, but it's possible. Anything is possible. It really is for all of us. Um, it seems crazy to me when I say second home, because I've just bought one and I'm like, wow, that just seems insane. But it's not. It's not. And a lot of this, for some of you, it might not be about the material things. We're talking about tangible things like homes and studios and cars and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're kind of quite tangible things that you can put onto a board or a vision that then you can aim towards. But for you, for others, it might be you wanna feel free. That's one of my big things. I do strive towards material things, but I know that actually what's important to me more than anything is freedom. That's massive for me, freedom. But then that interpretation of freedom can be related to so many things, like the freedom to get up and spend my day the way I want to, the freedom that if my children need me, I can just drop everything and go to their school. But it stretches beyond that now, and so freedom could be for me to just get on a plane and go to my second home. Freedom can be for me to just go, "Do you know what, kids? We're just gonna go and hop on a plane, and we're gonna go to Bali for a month. I've just decided we're gonna go there." So it's having then the means to be able to do that. But I know deep down, take all of that stuff away, it's just stuff. It is just stuff, and actually what is important is inside here. And I know that, but it's quite exciting, stretching beyond our means and growing and seeing where we can take it. But again, it's all based on your own individual situation and what you want and what making art a living means to you. And that's the first step really, is defining that. What does that actually look like for you? And you don't have to get it completely right. Yeah, Janine says here, I'm not making enough to live off, but I love my arty life. Yeah, great, isn't it? That's the first step, isn't it? It's creating that life that you love, and then you know that you can expand if you want to. Simon's here. Hello, Simon. Um, Let me just see. Haley says, I'm with you, loving art life, working hard to make it a living so I can have even more art time. That's a good driver, isn't it? To have more time to make my art. If I make a living from my art, I can have more time to make. Like Linda, the crazy glass lady. Linda says that now, like she now has that time to wake up each day and be in her studio. I bumped into an old friend. I was in Ironbridge and I went with Chris, who was over from the US, and I went and bumped into a lady in this gallery who I'd not seen for years. And she used to have a florist, and she said that she had this opportunity to set up a little studio space, and it's in like a museum, it's attached to a museum. This again, why the Seven Keys is important and being connected to people, because there are opportunities out there when you keep connecting to people. And so this is 100% the book. What I talk about all the time is being intentional about connecting with people, because Jan Parks, who I'm talking about, said that she was connected to this museum. She was always just chatting to people, and that this opportunity came along. Do you want this space? And it was like a ridiculously low cost. And it's the most beautiful space, and it has amazing footfall. And she said, I took it on thinking, well, if I can just cover the cost of having it, then that's great. And it's completely, she said, giving her the most amazing living. She makes so much money from that space. And again, sometimes it's having the courage to say yes to those things, to sometimes take a risk, because a lot of people might have thought, "Oh, I don't know, because I don't know if I'll be able to cover the cost of it." And so sometimes it is about having the faith that I know I can make that happen, and if I can cover the cost, then, and it's working that out and being brave enough to do those things. And so if she hadn't have taken it, because this is what go back to the beginning of talking about working things out on paper. If she'd have worked things out on paper and thought, oh, okay, right, I need to sell this amount to cover the costs. And, it could have filled her with a lot of doubt around, oh, I don't know if I could make that happen. But she went in with a different mindset of, right, let's go in and see and make this work. And I'll give it 12 months. And if I can cover my costs in 12 months, then that's great. And went in with that mindset. And it ended up paying up dividends, and she ended up shutting the floristry down, and now she is full-time in this space. And she said it's just absolutely incredible. That's just her space that she's in every day. And so you just don't know. It's just such a cliche, but you don't know what is around the corner, and you don't know with every conversation what opportunity is going to be presented to you that could be the ticket to making a living. I've heard it time and time again where people have been invited to go and be a guest artist in a space such as a museum, there was one friend of mine, she went into it's like an animal sanctuary, and got chatting to them, and they said, "Oh, well, we'll just set you up with a little studio in the corner of the shop." And she made so much money from that opportunity. She made a living from that alone. So, part of what I'm gonna be talking about next week is understanding the art you make and being intentional about finding people and talking to people, because that is usually where the opportunities arise, is from other people. It's not from trying to do this by yourself. It's by chatting to people and they go, "Oh, we've got this space for you. We've got this whole bottom floor of a cafe that you can have for free." That's what happened to me years ago. I was given a studio space and I was given this space for 12 months and it was absolutely incredible. Now, I will say I didn't make a living from that opportunity, and I did end up shutting it down because it was it was like, it was not making me any money whatsoever. But the point is that I was given that space by following these 7 keys, and actually by having that space, I learned so much. I was then put in touch with other people, and it was almost like a stepping stone to what I did next. So, it was almost like that point in time of giving that space, even though it wasn't financially viable, was an important part of my journey. So, sometimes we have to fail and we have to have situations that don't pay off because it's part of where you're going. So again, this whole like making art your living is part of accepting that of course we don't want to kind of take an opportunity that's going to rinse us dry and be very stressful. But equally, sometimes that is part of our journeys. That was part of my journey. And it's accepting that if that comes your way, you'll cope. So yeah. Jolanda's with us. Hello. Oh, Linda's tuning in for the Blue Mountains. That sounds great. Sandra's tuning in from Belgium. Tiggy Art's tuning in from Birmingham, which is just down the road from me. Robbo from New Zealand, good to see you. Lisa's tuning in from Glasgow and up in Scotland in the UK. Yeah, love Lisa's comment, making a life. Oh, Diane's just moved into a new home in Georgia. I'm thinking it's really time to dive into the 7 keys. My new dream studio will be ready. Yeah. Oh my gosh, mid-September. Fantastic. Um, So yes, I'm running these Make Art Your Living workshops next week. I've been doing this now for years, and it's the last time I'm going to be doing this one for a while. I've got no plans to run Make Art Your Living next year, just because I'm working on new and exciting projects for you all. There's some new things coming, and I'm very excited. So I've got no plans to run this workshop again next year. So it's going to be a while before I do this one again. Robin, I like this one. I want to be location independent. I want to absolutely love what I do. I like that one, Robin. I'm the same. I want to be location independent, and I've been thinking a lot about what that means, um, and how that could look, with children and homeschooling and, all the things. I'm kind of like exploring that at the moment. So I hear you. Catherine says, yes, we artists, we can think out of the box. I like this one too. Catherine says, I no longer worry about what people think. It can really impede what you want to do. Yeah, yeah. Vicky says, I need to go back to mindset. I think the universe is telling me to just create and sell. So Hannah says, I'm connecting with people isn't something I'm good at. Is it still possible without it? So yeah, of course it is. But if you want to, so here's the thing with this one, Hannah. Um, I want to pull this apart, and that my brain's going in a million different directions, which is why I'm just pausing for a minute. So where am I going to start, Michelle? Hannah, okay. So the first thing is connecting with people isn't something I'm good at. So that's the first thing, is to reframe that. Because if you keep saying, I'm not good at connecting with people, you'll never be good at connecting with people. So if you keep telling yourself that, you'll never be good at it. So you might want to just reframe the way you say that and say that, it's something that I'm working on. Connecting with people is something that I'm working on. It doesn't come natural to me. So just reframe that, because you don't want to keep saying that you're not good at it, first of all. And then secondly, if you're not a people person and you actually think, I don't enjoy that part. I don't enjoy going out and chatting to people. There's definitely ways around that. You're here right now connecting with us. So what you could look at is, how do I create a living by dealing with the very fewest people possible? And that happens There are so many artists who don't deal with people. They've gone down the gallery route or representation from somebody else who just takes their art and they do all the peopling. So many different ways. You can actually just do things. I mean, this is why we're so gifted right now with social media. You don't even need to actually speak to anybody. And you could actually hire somebody. And that might make you think, what? Hire someone? Yeah, you could hire somebody to do your social media, to be the person that connects with people. So you make your art and you hire somebody, which you can do in a really, really cost effective way. And so it's thinking out of the box, isn't it? It's thinking about that might seem crazy, but it's not crazy, actually. Loads of people do that. That might be stretching your goal a little bit. So that might be your best goal for you, thinking about, wow, having somebody work for me who does all the peopling. Put that out there, Hannah. How does that feel when I say that to you? Do you feel like, no, because I couldn't manage somebody. I can't hire someone. I couldn't. So they're all the things that I used to say. I can't hire people. I can't have anybody working with me. I'm all over the place. I, but now I do. I have a team and it's amazing. I never thought I would be that person. Never, ever, ever thought I'd be that person that could even have my own business because I'm so terrible. I was so terrible with money. That's what I kept saying to myself. So terrible with money. I can't manage money. So whilst I kept saying that to myself, well, yeah, well, no, I couldn't manage it. But then I had to reframe what I was saying to myself. And I've always said I'm not a people person too. So yeah, that's what I would say to that one. Great question. And like Lisa said, yeah, you've just connected here with all of us. You are good at this, Hannah. You've literally come on a live call and asked an amazing question. You are connecting already. I love how everyone's replying to you there as well. Sandra says, after my divorce, is making art a healing process for me, but it also made it financially very difficult for me. So I'd love to sell my art now. Oh, Sandra, it's possible. It absolutely is. You can. Um, and it's about breaking it down into steps that feel comfortable but are pushing you out of your comfort zone. There's that amazing quote by David Bowie of when you're pushing yourself out your comfort zone, you just want to be feeling your tippy toes in the water of the depth of the water. You don't want to be in the water kind of like, but you want to be out far enough that you can just feel your toes and you kind of edging on that feeling of, ooh, that's a great place to be. And so when we're talking about this making art a living, a lot of people making art a living is the huge, massive mountain that you're looking at. So you can't even get your head around that. And or it's you being in the deep end of the pool and you can't swim. And that's what you're looking at. But actually, there's so many steps before that. And that's what you need to be looking at. So Sandra, going back to you about um, making a living, when you look at what that looks like, it might feel big. It might feel like a big mountain. And so it's about bringing it back to, if some of you are in full-time jobs, it's looking at what would it look like for me to drop one day at work, even if you think that you wouldn't be allowed to drop one day at work. What would it look like if you dropped one day at work? And then you're transitioning to making a living. What does that look like? Because all of a sudden that might seem doable. And you start to go, let's replace that one day now without me even having to go down one day. What does that look like? So, can I start making one day a week salary now before I make the commitment to drop one day? And when you start making one day salary, you go to your employer and say, can I drop one day? Can I go down to 5 days? And if they don't let you, maybe you look for a different job that does that, it's keeping this open mind of the journey and the twists and turns and the different pathways that are going to open, and never base your future on where you are right now with the job that you have right now, because anything can happen. There's new jobs and there are new situations. And so yeah. Um Mm. Okay, so Hannah's just added a little bit here to say that because of my autism, my existence makes people uncomfortable, uncanny valley for different communication types, um, and people are automatically on guard. And so maybe Hannah, though, because I mean, we have a lot of people in our community with autism. I'm personally related to people with autism, and um, one thing I will say is that one of the biggest things that you can do is kind of work on that perception that other people have of you, and then walking in them and then being on guard. That may be true. And you may have had a situation where that's happened and now it's left a part of you that's feeling kind of hurt, like that person was judging me, and that's not nice. And so there's a part there that's hurting now, that's a bit on guard now and doesn't want to go back in places like that because we don't want to feel that again. And actually, if you can work on those parts and actually walk into that cafe without, and I've had to work on this over the years. I've had to work on this letting go of what people think of me and the judgment people have on me, and it's been one of the most liberating things that I can do. And, because I've been hung up about, oh gosh, so many things. I mean, I can't even list them all. There's so many about the way I write, the way I speak, the way, and I've had people comment on the way I blink, and I've had so many comments from people over the years on who I am and how I look and what I do. And so I've worked really hard now on just letting that go, and actually focusing on what this 7 key process is finding your own voice, Hannah, your voice and your people, the people that respect you and see you for who you are and see your creativity for what it is. And everyone else, the people that are going to kind of judge you in the cafe, they actually don't matter. So going back to this process of find your voice, your purpose, your people, which is what I talk about in the book, that's what matters, Hannah, and those other people don't. And so when you get to that point, and that's not an easy process to get to, but I would encourage you to kind of embrace that maybe, and I'm sending you a big, big hug. um, so yeah, I'm the same. Catherine says I'm a sociable person, but when I make art, I love to be alone and relish my time. Yeah, I'm definitely like that. When I'm in my zone, I like to be by myself. But I like to then dip out again and chat about it with people, but I'm very insular in those parts. Chris says, I want to connect with people, but it seems difficult. Um, my message in art is communication, sublime messages, story of core values, people scared of scammers. Okay, yeah. So, Chris, this is going to help next week when we go through this framework together, because what we're going to do is teach you how to look at your art and connect it to people and actually build relationships like this, and conversation. And, you don't need thousands of people. And so when you build up relationships with people, they trust you and they know that you're not a scammer. And so that comes from having conversations. So you can definitely overcome that, Chris, definitely. So this is a good question that came in saying, I recently read Find Your Artistic Voice, which is a super book. I love that book so much, from Lisa Congdon. And I wanted to ask, how long did it take you to find your voice? I don't feel like I found it because, and I talk about this in the book, that, and I actually used a quote from Lisa Congdon in here, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but the quote is, I just need to see if I can find it now because it's going to bug me otherwise. Finding your voice is a misleading term because it sounds like arriving at something final. It implies that once you've found your voice, you've made it to something final that will remain unchanged. But in reality, the voices of artists change and evolve. And so for me, finding my voice, I feel like there have been moments of in my art, for example, when I was creating paintings, I feel like I found my voice there, and I was like, "Oh, this is great. I found like a style and a technique that was really unique to me." And that was exciting. And everyone wanted to know how I did it. And I was like, "Oh," but then it changed. So I didn't, so that was found and now on the shelf. And then it moved on to something else. And then so my voice is continually changing all the time. And I'm now at a point where I'm about to evolve again, and I'm working on new things next year, and my voice is evolving and changing. And so there's parts of my voice that I find, like imprint is a big word for me, that I discovered about 3 years ago. And that now is one of my roots. I talk about roots. It's one of my roots that drives everything that I do. And so that feels like a really important part of my voice. But it's like this ever evolving thing. Now, I'll use somebody else as an example, Sabina, who is in our community. And Sabina came to us through the same workshop about 3 years, 4 years ago, and didn't feel like she had a voice. She said, "My art's all over the place. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just kind of, I don't know. I don't know what who I am, what I am." And so Sabina decided to spend 12 months focused on play, experiment, delving and shelving, which I talk about in this book, and kind of refining and connecting with subject matter and techniques and colors. And she just immersed herself in that delve and shelve, which I talk about. And what came at the end of the 12 months was this collection of art, which is the figure and all of so very representational face, and then out comes this hair and there's all this texture and patterns, and the palette is usually the same. And so she said, I feel like I found my voice in that moment. She's found her voice, but it will evolve and change. And so she's found something and it's worked, and now she's exhibiting and she's been commissioned, and it's amazing. And that was from dedicated 12-month period. Um, but she'll start evolving soon. She's maybe watching this, I don't know, thinking, I don't want to evolve yet. But she will, because it happens to everybody. And then she might end up doing something completely different. So yeah, it's kind of like, I think about it, it's like pockets of time. Um, so I hope that answers your question. It's so fluid and Um, Robin says, "That's exactly what worries me. People always want what I used to make years ago, but I have moved beyond that, and I feel like I've lost that support." So you just need new people, Robin, and that's fine, because when you will evolve. And so this is what I said about it's been it's a continuous cycle of, like, I'm going to create new things next year, and there'll be a lot of people here that maybe not be interested in those new things, and that's fine. It's an evolution, and you'll lose people. And then the job then is to find the new people. Who are those people out there that are connecting with the new direction that you're going in, because they're out there, and there's a place for everybody. So yeah, um, I'm gonna head now because I'm out of time, but I'm gonna be here. I'm loving this already. We haven't even started the workshops yet. We're going to be covering so much next week. You can sign up via the link above or below, wherever it is. And yeah, we're going to be delving into a lot of these topics because it's the last time I'm running them. I'm going to fire your questions away at me, and I'll do maybe some Instagram live Q&As too. I'll do some like 60-second Q&A reels answering some of these questions. So if you're watching this on a replay, ask questions below in the comments now. If you're over on Instagram, go and have a look, or Facebook, and check my reels. In the next week, I'll be answering questions that you're all asking. I'm going to go through and check all the questions and just do some live Q&As. So I'm excited about this so much. I love this topic. You can probably tell. I love it so much. Okay, I'm going to go, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.